Hello, this is Stephanie and welcome. Today I have a great and exciting guest, Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sehan. And I'm so excited to have her on. She is quite active as a healer, teacher, minister, and really just an all-around powerhouse. So I'm going to go ahead and read a quick bio and we'll get going. So, Dr. Sharnael is a captivating multidisciplinary expert who seamlessly blends naturopathic medicine, spirituality, and quantum science to empower individuals on their journey to wholeness. As the founder of True TV and author of five groundbreaking books, including her international bestseller, The Science of Miracles, Remembering the Frequency of Love, Dr. Sharnael offers a unique perspective on achieving optimal health and unlocking human potential. Her global influence spans over 51 countries, where she shares her transformative insights through speaking engagements, online classes, and social media platforms. Dr. Sharnael has experienced paranormal phenomena and spiritual encounters, seeing these as linked to the awakening of human consciousness and spiritual ascension. Today, she helps people tap into their powerful intuition, deepen their connection to Source, and use practical tools to elevate their lives with ease and joy. Welcome, Dr. Sharnael.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Um, I only recently met Dr. Chanel when I attended a retreat of hers in October, and it was really an amazing and transformative 4 days. And you shared so much of yourself and your story, and that kind of authenticity is really not forgotten. And you were also impeccable with your words. And really, the last person I knew with that degree of awareness of the creative power of what we say was probably my original teacher, who was my unity minister, Dr. Amalia Frank, in 1983.
Wow.
So it was very memorable. And, this podcast is all about teaching and remembering how we create our lives and our worlds through our thoughts, emotions, and imagination, as I say at my intro. And I've explored a lot of topics in this podcast, and I feel like it's important to remember the basic building blocks, of our human consciousness, how we direct and create with universal mind and connection to source. And, in journalism, it's called the backstory. And, you have to go back to the beginning of a story for context when you're, giving new information. And so this podcast has been moving into a lot of new information over the last year, and we're coming up on the year. And so I think that, I just thought you would be an excellent guest to really remind us of the beginning of this story. And so, but first, before we really get into that, I'd really love to hear a lot of my guests. I love to hear about people's awakenings. And it seems like a lot of healers have their awakening involves, a contact by like an otherworldly being. And I think that was yours as well. And if you'd like, I'd love for you to share about that and your awakening and anything that, wasn't covered in your bio that you'd like my audience to know about you.
Awesome. Yay. Wow. I'm so happy that you have this platform to help people and to that whole aspect where you said to remind. I love the word remind because it means to mind again, meaning to get into that alignment of, for me, what that looks like is I am the mind of Christ. And when I get out of that, I go back into remembering when I choose to anyway, and bring myself into that alignment. So I love that word remember. I love remind. I love a lot of those things. Anyway, yes, I have had actually several encounters. I had an encounter around five. I wish I knew the exact age. Um, either five or six. In Montana, I had an encounter with the man that I now know as Yeshua, but at the time in second grade, I was told that he was Jesus. And, he didn't say, hey, this is my name or anything. But that was quite an awakening for getting teary just talking about it. And he has actually come to me twice. And then I also have this other female type woman that has come to me several times. And I have one time she came with another guy. I say guy, he looked more male. And I choose to know who these beings are or where they come from. My language at the time was angel in my path at that time, and or when you study the word angel, it just means messenger. So since then, like I said, she's usually come to me in really difficult times and or times of major pivot in like life changing choices that I've been in. Um, the time that she came first to me was with the other being, and I was, to give you an example of what I mean by transformation or desperation, I should say. um, I was in the middle of the end, although I didn't know it was the end, quite close to the end, of a 13-year really, really super uber abusive um, situation. I was going to say partnership, but that's not accurate. Um, and um, and because of those changes, there were it changed my career as well, just because all my ties with this person also included my career, and also because of the path that I was in was a ministry path, which they were not super excited about women in ministry anyway. And then to be a divorced woman in ministry didn't look good when I was on international television, as a representative for, you know, ministry people. And so yeah, it was what I required apparently, and or you know, that's I choose to know why they decided to come when they've come. Like I said, she's come to me when I've been pregnant. She's come to me when there's been times, that I needed to know, like I was about to lose a baby, or when I needed to make a significant career choice that was out of my box or out of my realm, just for a little guidance of like a little push to kind of go like, it's okay, do that, and or to comfort at times. Um, wow.
It's okay. This is part of your authenticity, is your heart feeling when you're talking. It's beautiful,
Yeah, like when I talk about them and when I think about or remember those situations, it always makes me feel the same way I did at the time. It
right?
brings like right in a time capsule. It just brings me right back. And the feeling that I feel when they're around or when I'm aware that they're around is just absolutely and complete pure love inside and out. Like it's just and I end up doing like what I call love leaks, where the love is so much it just comes out of my eyes, I just tear up. But and yeah, and then there's other times when I'm like, hey, I'm super desperate, can you come? And they don't come at my request necessarily, to my knowledge. Maybe somehow my subconscious called them when they came before. And I always look, I'm always in that spot of like, hey, can you come back again? Can you give me some guidance? And it hasn't worked that way yet, so I choose to know. And also, maybe the lesson is that they're here all the time, and that it's not about seeing them, but it's about just remembering that there's no separation, whoever these things are, whether they're off planet or my higher self or my future self or God, angels, or, you know, um, it's something that's been perplexing. And I went through this whole thing of like, who are these people? or, not people, but to a point where it almost made me a little nuts. But now I've just decided it doesn't really matter. What matters is, well, it does matter. And also, what matters is love. And I actually had someone last week who wanted me to be on their podcast, and she had read about this encounter, and she wanted to do a pre-interview because she said, "How do you know that these beings were not?" um the demons in light, masking as light. And that makes me sad. That really makes me sad that
Yeah,
someone, they just, if you don't know, you don't know. And if you do, you do.
right,
And she
right,
decided not that I was not a good fit because she was so worried that these people or these things were demons. And I'm like, it's okay.
right. Well, I can feel the love and coming through the wires here. And I I like the way you said it matters, but it doesn't matter because, I've never had the visual visit of any other dimensional being. And yet I commune with my higher self every day and I can feel like what you're talking about, And I suppose it's probably because I've probably said, don't be showing up in my room in the middle of the night. you know,
That's what they usually do. I mean,
right,
showed up. One came at the end of my bed in the middle of the night one time, and I looked up, startled, and she just said, "You're pregnant." And I was terrified because I'd only seen her once so far, and I was terrified to be pregnant because
yeah.
a baby, and I wasn't expecting that. And I looked over at my former, and I woke him up and was like, "Oh my God. Do you see that?" When I looked, she was gone. And he was like, "What's going on?" And I said, "She just came back and she said that I'm pregnant." And he was like, "Oh, she also said, 'Don't worry, we're here to help.'" And that means a lot right now, especially. But when I told him, he said, "Well, that's good because we're definitely going to need the help." And what's crazy is the next day, I kind of forgot about it, but I didn't, and I wasn't really thinking about it. And then my oldest, who was in preschool at the time, came home from school, and she had this picture that she had colored and pulled out of a coloring book, and it was one of those precious moment coloring books. I don't know if you're familiar with precious moments, but it was an angel with big wings, pushing a baby carriage. And she said, "Mom, I made this for you." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, you're pregnant."
Oh,
And
wow.
she would talk about the Birdman all the time. She had men, I guess, that came to her, and she would call him the Birdman. And to the point where my former one time was just shopping at the grocery store, and she saw them at the store, and they were talking to her, and she freaked out and was crying. And he called me in a panic, and he didn't believe any of this stuff. But when it was my daughter doing it, he was starting to agree that there's something going on. And he just called me in a frantic and was like, "She's talking about these birdmen that she's seeing. She's wigging out. Like, I'm coming home. I'm not even getting groceries." And when she came home, she was still just bawling. And I said, "Okay, what did they say? What are they saying?" And she said they kept saying, "Shane, be my guide. Be my guide." And she was like 4, 5.
Wow.
And so I had asked my mentor at the time, "What in the world does that mean, be my guide?" And the bottom line is, even at a young age, they are at our bidding. They are at our call waiting. And when we're really vague about what we require, like you could be at a restaurant and someone would come along and say, "What would you like to eat, ma'am?" And you're like, "Food." you know it's like, well, how do you work with that? So conscious language and belief systems, like what your whole podcast is about, is specificity is really important, and what you require, what you speak, what you think about, what you feel. and using your tools, because I look at conscious language as a tool to create and allow even these messengers to be guided by our consciousness and our awareness and our language and our imagination.
Right. Well, um, thank you for sharing that story. And I knew you were a in the ministry, and I kind of wondered um, how you that transition had happened, and so that was interesting to hear about. I think I'm glad it happened personally. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and and yeah, that was going to be my first big question was to talk about conscious language and your experience with it in terms of, how our thoughts and hence our words, create our world. And when you were speaking at the retreat, you were very clear about what you were saying. And I was recently with a friend for a few days who whose words I just stopped and I said, you're super powerful, but I'm not sure you're listening to your words because your words are really not powerful. And I have experienced that myself, recently, really starting to listen to myself and be like, wow, you're really putting out some not what you want. So, yeah, talk to us a little bit about that. I can't remember what you would say. I always say erase when I say something, but you have
Cancel
to
clear.
cancel clear. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and to go back with just a slight upgrade in what you said is you mentioned, wow, you are not very powerful. And to be honest, she actually is powerful either way, right? And we can be
Right.
powerful creating something really crappy and poopy, or we can
Right.
create something really beautiful and masterful. And you're right, people aren't always awake to how they present their technology. Um, and how they're being used with their own technology. I mean, the culture, social engineering has created an easy way to misuse the technology with joy, it's like funny even the way it's not funny, but I'm saying those who are misusing it do it in a joking manner as if it's not powerful, and it is. Because the subconscious is very literal as well as the actual consciousness that is really literal, because there are unlimited possibilities in the air. And as we speak, those possibilities adhere to a timeline. And either way, so we're either creating a beautiful timeline that can be our highest when we choose, and or we default. Even an example is, people will say something like, oh my God, I just I laughed until I died, cancel clear, or something, like that is a funny, to them, cultural acceptable misuse of technology. And when we say things like that, if we do, the subconscious goes, okay, and literally starts to create that and within the body.
Right.
And some people are not aware of that.
Right.
And
And
and,
that's
and you,
why you're here.
yes, yes, and you are here, and you're helping people remember that. And I appreciate the more people who can help us remember that technology, because the tools are amazing. Like, Source has given us these amazing tools to have a whole different reality that's available to us when and if we choose that.
Right. I love that you call it technology. That's kind of like taking back a word that can, you know, the where does the heart come in with this too? I mean, we're using the word technology and that kind of makes you think almost machine-like, but no, it's really the technology of how we create. But I'd also think what about bringing in the heart?
Very important. Maybe the most important. And because the heart is the biggest technology of magnetization, of bringing in that magnet. And, a lot of what our cells and organs and thoughts and words do radiate. And they have a little bit of magnet to them, but the heart will radiate and magnetize more than anything within our technology. And so when we think something positive, but we talk about something negative, there's a mismatch. And even if we think something positive and we speak something positive, but our heart isn't in agreement yet. For example, let's say you're going to go on a business venture for the first time ever, and you're going to be an entrepreneur, and you're doing all the mantras, and you're speaking all the things, and you're thinking about all the positivity, and yet there is lack somehow within the heart and or maybe even an ancestral remembrance of grandmother trying to sell eggs on the side of the road and just not having success and seeing her be upset and I'm making this up, but that memory is lodged within the subconscious sometimes if it's not cleared, and it can cause a mismatch. So we have some positivity in the equations, but then we have that subtraction from the magnet pulling back from that radiation, and you have like almost two step forward, one step back, stuck energy, or I call it purgatory, energetic purgatory. And so, for people who are listening and you are stuck, you feel stuck, or you've said the words, I feel stuck, or paralyzed, or I have no motivation, cancel clear. Any of those things could be a hint that there's a mismatch in the equation of the field.
Right. I think I describe that as really you have to know yourself, right? And you have to do the work. And for me, in the beginning, manifesting was pretty easy. And then there were things that didn't manifest. And I had to sit with that and realize that probably deep in my, could be ancestral, but in my own belief system, I just didn't think I deserved it, or I didn't think, it was possible. And so when things don't happen the way that I feel like I'm using the technology to create, I say that, okay, that's showing me my work. What is it that that
Missing.
yeah, what is it that I have to clear out and heal? And that's why, things like inner child work and all these tools to really know ourselves so that we can be aware of where our programming is and what programming is keeping us from manifesting. Because I mean, I've been aware of this technology since my early 20s. And it's only recently that I'm really discovering really huge belief systems that I have about money or self-value or all kinds of things, And it's exciting because I'm like, these are the big things that have been stopping me. So, yeah, that's that's how you know where your work is to me, you know.
Yes, whatever shows up in your life, you will know exactly where you are or and where I am, depending on what shows up. If lack shows up, something's still there. If uh manipulation is there, then that's within you, within me.
Right.
When whatever shows up, and you mentioned the word interesting, you mentioned the word probably. That word probably is comes from pro babble, meaning before like there was pure speech at one time, and then scripturally it says that the Tower of Babel, was built and all these things happened, and then everyone was set in these different languages to confuse everyone. And for me, my mentor would talk about coming back to pure speech and
Wow.
union with God. and source or universe or creator or whatever you choose, source code to create again. Because someone was worried about us creating and getting too big for our britches, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but I can listen to someone usually within 3 or 4 minutes and find the snag in technology, and then we can clear it, and then people will see different if they listen to themselves and to me, and if because I'll do what you do is I'll listen to people and I hear the snag, and then I'll repeat back to them, did you realize that you are saying these things and this is what the outcome of that would be? What is that what you choose?
Right.
And then finding a replacement for them to be alive in or believe in to remember our new reality. And as they have repetition and desire with that and neuroplasticity, the best way to change the lanes is desire and repetition.
Mm.
Because we have, on a neuroscience level, we have these paths within the brain to a rut point that are like concrete,
Right.
and they're on autopilot, most of them, because like you get up, you go to the bathroom, you have coffee, how many have you guys who listening have ever driven somewhere and then you got there and you're like, shit, how did I get here? It's like I don't even remember driving. It's because our body is so much technology that those ruts are just
Yeah.
literally concrete. And what happens is when we remember and when we have repetition and desire, there is an enzyme that releases from the liver, and I think it's called Kyle, KHY. It's not spoken of much, and when it releases, it will dissolve those pathways into light and give the option for the new pathways.
Wow.
So usually without that enzyme, we have these paths that are so concrete that they say it takes 21 days to break down these concrete pathways. And I say concrete, cancel clear, who wants concrete in their head? And also whatever it's made out of, these paths that are just very set. And to break the dendrites and to create new ones in a new path, it takes repetition for 21 days, um, and some desire. But the issue is sometimes people's desire isn't always there, and it's sort of like some days it's here, some days it's there, sometimes you don't think it is. I don't know, because nothing's been clear yet. And without, if you choose, you could do it instantly
Right.
with just a lot of desire from the heart again, using that heart magnet, and that sends a message down to the liver, and the liver's like, let's make some ascension enzymes here, and let's trans get some transfiguration going on and dissolve this, and instantly you have these new highways to the new path.
Right. That's I did some many years ago did some NLP work, and it was basically creating new pathways, of and it was really powerful, but I really I've never heard of the enzyme part of it, and it was I'm not sure no, I know I didn't do 21 days, but I saw this person for, months, and I felt like I really changed some of my neural pathways, and they were pretty deep, you know. So,
Grief actually has the biggest pathway of
grief,
when the grief, for whatever reason, probably genetic memory and body memory, and definitely the pathways when we lose someone, quote, we never lose anyone, but when they're no longer in this 3D existence, those pathways, like my mother-in-law, my grandma, it's like my mother-in-law's birthday's coming up, and this is her birthday without, being with her, and or holidays, or I used to speak with my grandmother every day at 4 or whatever. So when she passed, or when these people have passed, the GPS of those highways is like, oh yeah, now you call your grandma or she calls you. And so when the times come up in this 3D construct, that highway goes, but there's no destination anymore because the other person isn't there. So it puts it like a loop in the neuroscience. And so a lot of people, when they're going through grief, um, I used to look at it as emotional and all just completely emotional. And I was like, gosh, why am I so emotional? Why is this still happening? Why am I still crying? Like, it's been weeks, it's been months, it's been, years or whatever. And also, they're still in our DNA, especially if they're family. And so there's that feeling of like almost like a collapse in the body of like that missing part because there's an essence of them not with us in that way. But it's also a relearning. We're having to relearn, meaning those pathways have to dissolve and new habits have to be formed. And sometimes it takes way more than 21 days unless you have that ascension piece. And my ascension piece for that enzyme in that aspect is realizing that they are actually still here
Oh, yeah.
and make that the pathway is because they're only a breath away, like literally.
Right.
um
Well, I think that's a very good description, I had of when you're in grief and you feel like you're trapped there, you're in that loop, you know, uh, that you were talking about. The highway has no destination, so you're just looping. And grief is a big one, you know. And um, I I'd also like for you to, the other thing that I think is good for people to really realize that when you change your consciousness, you change the world. And, at a time like with the Great Awakening that's going on and disclosure and all the things, and people feel like the world is crazy and it's out of control. And it's like, I've talked to a few people yesterday when I was visiting my dad. They were like, oh, the world's crazy. And I'm like, why? What's going on for you? And they're like, oh, this new president. And I'm like, what does that have to do with your life? I'm like, where's your life? Because that power is, we're definitely not taught that we can change our own lives. And we definitely aren't shown that when you do change, you change the collective consciousness because we're all one. So that's, I think, a really powerful thing to remind people of.
yes, we all have our biofield, and as we do any inner work, it changes our field, which is transferable to not just everyone else's field that we touch. We can ignite Christ to everyone that we contact. And the earth has its own Schumann resonance and or frequency and or consciousness realm, which is 7.86. And as we're grounded and we touch the earth and in this 3D, spacesuit that we live um, in the middle of space, we are changing space also. And I say spacesuit because, we're technically in space. And what's also interesting, I'll add this, is partnership on a sexual level is really, really sacred and really important because as we shift, we will also shift anyone we've ever been with physically, sexually, and we will shift every child we've ever carried. For the women who are listening, if anyone does a DNA test, there's been testing around for like 15 years now, where if you go get tested, you can find not only every child that you've ever carried. Someone could say, do the testing and look and go, you have um 6 children that you have carried, and 3 of them were boys and 3 of them were girls. And that's why even like my daughter who's pregnant now, they can do genetic testing to find out the gender, but they have to do a certain one because if she's had children before, it can accidentally bleed in and it can not give a good answer because she's had a boy and she's currently pregnant. And if they don't do a certain exact um, test, it can show a boy again because her boy is still showing up in her body, even though he's out and about and 3 years old. She's forever carrying him,
Wow.
and as she's still carrying this one. For me, I've had three children who are out and about, and I've had seven miscarriages. So they would find 10 children within me still, and they can also test every partner that I've ever been. So, all to say, when we shift us within, we are actually shifting our children, and we're also shifting every partner that have been with us. And if it feels hard to you, in the shift. It may be because we're shifting everyone and our ancestral um, shifting because we can actually shift 4 generations back and forward. Because my daughter, I have three, who right now they're all carrying all their eggs that they ever will ever have. And those eggs were actually formed when they were 5 months within me. I'm the one who helped them make those eggs. So I carried all my grandchildren already and all of my children at the same time. So now that she is born, this baby was already in me, her, and all her eggs that she carried at 5 months were in me at 5 months. And now this baby that's coming forth and the baby that's already been was actually inside of me as well. This is why mother's connections are so amazing as far as, if you know when your kids are having problems or whatever, because we feel it inside. And our moms know that about us as well. And that's that connection, that motherly matriarch uh, connection is very, very interesting. But going back to what you said is when we shift, we do shift our world because when we shift us and everything that's ever been in us, and all of those people who are out, who are also shifting, whether they like it or not, now they're changing their field, which shifts even more people. Because when they shift, they're shifting everyone inside of them. And there's this replication that just goes on and on and on because we're all divided by what, 6 degrees of separation anyway.
Right.
So we truly are shifting our world with every enzyme that we choose to dissolve whatever pathways for everyone.
Wow. Well, certainly an interesting perspective for me, and I'm shifting a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um,
And this, and again, this is why sacred sexuality is absolutely important because we don't have to make it difficult when there's less to shift for. I mean, not that it's bad to shift for them, and also um yeah, there's and even people who and I know we're running out of time for this time anyway, but we as healers and or I don't like that term, us as facilitators, um, we can actually take on other people's stuff easy too. Like one time I went to go see Dr. Lucky, and usually when he sees me, he's an MD, but he'll muscle test and make sure I'm me before he works on me. And one time I went to him and I wasn't me, and he was like, "Well, who are you?" And it took like literally an hour to figure out who I was, and I was actually my ex's new wife.
Whoa.
And I'm
Wow.
like, how did I get her? How did I get to be her? And of all the people, that's not anyone I wanted to to be. And who knows how long I was her. And I feel like I know how I somehow took on her. And but to be honest, he actually wasn't very honest in our relationship. And when we were apart, he called me one day and basically told me that there were some things going on with their relationship, and he had slipped up with her, and she therefore slipped up with him. And I felt for her because I had been in that situation.
Mm.
And somehow I immediately took her on. And it took me being aware that I was her because of this doctor, and then me having to clear whatever she was going through for about 45 minutes of my time and money before I could finally get back to me so he can work on me. And I was like, do I send her a bill?
Wow. Well, that's certainly a good example of we're all one for sure.
Yes, and to be really clean and clear when we're working with others, especially if we're in any sort of like, counseling, coaching, massage, healthcare, nursing, even medical, anything where there's a lot of inner exchange. Huh. Okay, so um, just to be clear that we make sure to check in every now and then and make sure we're clearing. And I use sage oil, I use and white angelica, and even me doing all of that, he still picked up that I who knows, I mean, it could have been weeks that I was her. I mean, I was me, but there was like an overlay of her somewhere in me that
Wow.
I was walking around being both of us at the time. It sounds schizophrenic, right?
It sounds fascinating, really. I mean, I will be, integrating all of this for quite some time. And, I'm sitting here thinking about, when I was coming up, it was still pretty much the free love era.
Yeah.
And it was like, you were pretty not very discriminating about uh, your sexual encounters. And so, which is, I'm like, maybe that was a psyop. Maybe that was planned, you know,
Yeah.
because who knows?
Yeah, and or maybe you're the one. And that, because if we're all one anyway, maybe that was your mission to be awake now for freeing and or creating sovereignty for all of those people. You
Well,
know,
I like that, and I was very, I was took my mission very seriously.
I love that.
But yeah. Well, I guess we can move into kind of thank you, man. Whew, I'll tell you. I yes, I hope that this is only one of, anytime you want to come and
I
go on
am,
here.
anytime you ever choose to have me back, this has been very fulfilling, literally fulfilling, powerful for me as well, and healing for me too. So I enjoy our interaction very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you came into my life. And, I believe in divine timing. And so it was perfect timing when I found you. And thank you again. And I know you're off to your very busy life, and we will be in touch again. But thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.